Hi, welcome to Don't Ask That Question. I'm Kelly O'Mara, and today we're going to jump into the uh, immigration debate that's hotly on the news all the time. But I think we're going to talk about it in a way that most people aren't aware of. We're going to talk about immigration laws that are already on the books that actually do work, and why it would solve a lot of problems if we simply enforce the laws on the books. Especially I look at the media. The media, you listen to them and they talk about, oh, immigration reform, and yet they never ever talk about the laws that we already have, that if we enforced them, we may not have some of the illegal entry problems that we currently are experiencing. Of course, that's a bigger issue. We'll get into that. My guest today is Jason Pena of the Federation of American Immigration Reform, or FAIR. Jason is a researcher and staff writer at FAIR. He previously worked at the Center for Immigration Studies, interpreting Latin American immigration news and policy, and worked on Capitol Hill, assisting with immigration and criminal justice policy. Jason holds a BA in criminal justice from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. Good to be here.
I'm really pleased to have you on. I'm happy to have the opportunity to discuss with you what works and what doesn't work in our immigration laws. I guess first, let's talk a little bit about numbers. So I've always known since I was handling immigration cases on Capitol Hill from 80 to 94, I guess it was,
Sure.
that the United States allowed more legal immigration than every other country in the world combined every year. Is that true?
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Okay, so and it's my understanding, I looked this up yesterday, that we have allowed 50 million, a little over 50 million legal immigrants since 1960. So it doesn't sound like, we're not allowing people to legally enter the United States, right?
No, I mean, when you look at the numbers, I mean, we are accepting immigrants from every corner of the globe. This idea that the US not taking in enough immigrants, refugees, asylees couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, when you compare us to other Western nations, any other nation across the globe, you see that we take in more than our fair share of legal immigrants.
Yeah, and this was always my understanding when I was handling immigration cases. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about the process. I'll share with you sort of an anecdote. So I worked for 4 members of Congress. 3 of them I actually handled the immigration cases. Immigrants would call the congressman and say, "Hey, I need your help. I'm trying to get my visa," and so it was my job to, work with them and through the Immigration Service and State Department and Department of Labor to try and get them their visa. So here's a scenario, okay? So what I found interesting is I would say 99% of the cases I handled were unskilled workers, okay? And back then, way back then, that was called the 6th preference, right? So we have preferences by which people can apply legally to come to the United States. And in fact, this is the visa bulletin that the State Department puts out every month, and it lists where all the visa dates are for people who have applied for visas. So I'll walk you through the process, and you can tell me, if I'm wrong or not. But
Let's go.
anyway, so this person in our district was here illegally, perhaps maybe doing kitchen help or mowing lawns, whatever. It was an unskilled job, but the employer, under the law, was allowed to petition for this person to become a legal resident under the unskilled preference. So they filed an I-140 with the Immigration Service. They filed a labor certification application with the Department of Labor, right?
Right.
And then they were allowed to stay in the United States, continue to live and work, no problem. And what I found interesting about this was that if you were in the Philippines and you weren't able to just walk across the border, and you applied for an unskilled worker visa at the nearest consulate office, You had to wait. At the time, there was a 20-year backlog. 20 years you sat in the Philippines waiting for your visa. But the people who were able to walk across the border illegally into the United States basically were rewarded for that behavior because they were allowed to stay in the United States and work and live, have a family,
Hmm.
whatever. And so, when I was handling these cases, which I actually enjoyed doing them, I thought it was terribly unfair to the people who had applied legally. They were stuck in the Philippines, couldn't do anything about it. They were never going to get a visitor's visa after that because, we know they want to live here. So they were just kind of stuck there. And that's basically my complaint, is that if we say to these people who illegally enter the United States, you cannot work here. And if you do, and we find out, we're going to deport you. Would that
Right.
not stop the illegal entry?
It would, but it also stems from not just verbal action, but it also stems from physical action. You know, when we look at to see how many illegal aliens we have in the United States, into your specific case, their employer petitioning them for them to stay here with authorization and to work here with authorization is mind blowing. What we need to be doing is ensuring that businesses are complying with the law, and one of those steps is implementing mandatory e-verify across the board, not just with with the government and their contractors. It has to go into the private sector as well. This is a huge magnet for illegal immigrants. We have to remember most immigrants, both legal and illegal, are coming here for economic reasons. If we Again, this is one facet of stopping illegal immigration and unlawful employment. If we were to implement e-verify, this would essentially disincentivize illegal aliens from coming into the United States, namely because if an employer has to go through the process and ensure that this individual has the proper documentation, has the proper information in order to obtain employment with them, and if they don't, the federal government is going to be notified and immigration agents are going to be at their doorstep. This would be a massive disincentive for both unscrupulous employers and illegal aliens themselves.
Yeah, but I mean, it's my understanding that was it 86 IRCA bill, Immigration Reform and Control Act of 86, or was it 87? That was
1986.
86. Okay. So that was supposed to penalize employers if they hired illegals. That was supposed
You
to
know,
solve it. Okay.
it
It
was
was supposed,
supposed to.
right. Okay. So what I'm saying is, again, the gist of all this is we don't enforce the laws that we already have on the books. So, oh, we have to change the laws. We have to reform immigration. We don't. I happen to think that our immigration laws are very, very fair. Having worked them, I think they're extraordinarily fair to everyone in the world. Okay. They're not fair, however, to the people who do it legally. If you're, an illegal coming across our border and working and living, it's not fair to those people who can't do that. It's a very that part of it to me is very unfair. Okay.
Absolutely.
But you're saying that, employers, if we go e-verify, then that'll solve the problem. I don't know. I mean, they were supposed to do this in 86.
No, and that's one aspect of deterring this type of practice from occurring. When we look at I guess, the autopsy of the 1986 immigration amnesty that occurred under the Reagan administration, enforcement never came. We were promised all these benefits, saying, "Hey, look, we're going to have worksite enforcement. INS agents are going to be everywhere. We're going to make sure that employers and businesses are doing their due diligence and making sure that they're hiring people here with authorization." It never happened.
Right.
And if we were to propose new laws such as e-verify, we have to make sure that these mechanisms, these safeguards, are being enforced. There's an interesting segment in there's a book by a CIS fellow by the name of Jerry Kammer, and he highlights this in the history of the 1986 amnesty. Was that there was a grace period where many employers felt like, okay, I have this time to get my affairs in order to start hiring lawfully, but then word got out that INS was stretched too thin. There weren't enough agents to ensure that businesses were abiding by the law. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. I mean, especially now under the Biden administration. I mean, they've essentially put an end to worksite enforcement.
Well, not only that, but we simply don't have a border at this point. It appears that it's an open border. There's
It's wide
nobody.
open.
There's nobody doing anything to stop it. And that's one of my questions, actually. So I say that, you know, the siege, basically it's a siege on our border, our southern border. My question is, you know, I think they said it's a million so far this
Yes,
year.
just over a million so far.
Right. So okay, these people are mostly unskilled, I'm sure, right?
Right.
Have language issues, are going to have very few employment opportunities. They're going to have the language barrier, no housing or access to local services. Where are they going? Does anybody know? Is anybody tracking? Do we have any idea where 1 million people went in this country?
You know, I'm not even sure the Biden administration knows the answer to that question. You know, it's frustrating because we see, you know, we see these reports of the DHS under the Biden administration's watch essentially flying illegal aliens and unaccompanied alien children into they're putting them on these planes and sending them onto these night flights across the nation. Some of them are New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and many of those places are just transit points. Many of them take buses to Dallas or Miami. We here at FAIR have highlighted this, that wait, where is this so-called transparency that this administration has been touting for since the very beginning? You know, and I think we can reasonably assume that many of these illegal aliens are going to places that have sanctuary jurisdictions, such as in California or New York, places that never cooperated with immigration authorities in the first place, but they'll be much more secure there because because many of the public benefits are also provided there for them, such as healthcare, education, providing other forms of welfare services.
Okay, so that's one of my questions. So we don't really know where they're going. We know that they're being dumped at certain points. And then from there, it's anybody's guess. Maybe they already have family here. Maybe they know people. Maybe they're seeking, you know, safety within a church for however long that can happen. But again, they have a lot of obstacles ahead of them, even if they want to work here, right? How are they
Right.
going to work here and provide for themselves if they go, you know, to an employer should say, hey, I can't hire you, right?
Right. Well, I think it comes down to my previous point, is that many of these illegal aliens will go, and again, many of them unskilled. They go to employers or businesses that turn a blind eye, essentially, to hiring illegal aliens in the first place. So many of them, so somewhat similar to the story you shared earlier, that they go to individuals that don't really care for the rule of law. They don't have any respect for our immigration laws. So they're going to go to those employers who will have no problem hiring them, paying them, and not tipping them off to immigration authorities.
Yes, but isn't again, I'm asking silly questions probably, but wouldn't you think that our government, ICE, would be aware of those major employers who are doing that?
One would think that ICE would be on this. I mean, it is part of their purview is worksite enforcement, ensuring that making sure that illegal aliens are not taking jobs here in the United States. I mean, even before the Biden administration took office, I mean, HSI wasn't doing all that much worksite enforcement to begin with. I mean, they were aware from, you know, of certain instances of unlawful hiring, but by and large, there was very limited worksite enforcement. One of the more notable examples was during the Trump administration when ICE had conducted an operation in those poultry farms in Mississippi, and that was a good first step. That was an excellent first step in cracking down with worksite enforcement. But we need more of that. We can't just have these isolated instances of arresting large numbers of illegal aliens and then like, okay, call it a day. We got like X amount, we'll
Right.
conduct another operation. in a few years, we also need to file sanctions and charges on these employers themselves. I mean,
Right.
if employers figure, hey, you know what, if my workforce, which is primarily or entirely composed of illegal aliens, was arrested by ICE and now they're being deported, if there's no mechanism in place to prevent them from hiring, such as them getting sanctioned, they're just going to keep doing it over and over and over again. It's not going to stop. So it's important that ICE, that the department within ICE that conducts these operations ensures that these employers are also punished for violating the law.
Right. And that was supposed to happen with IRCA in 86.
Right.
And it didn't. And that's a
It
long
did
time
not.
ago. Okay. I knew, it's so funny though. I knew it at the time when they were passing this legislation. I remember telling my member of Congress, this isn't going to fix the problem. I remember telling him that. But, it made me crazy. And again, it's one of those things where unless you actually work on these cases and understand the law and how it works, it doesn't mean anything. You think, oh yeah, well, we can find the employers and everything will be great and that'll stop people from coming. So my question is, 1 million people, okay, what's that? 5 FedEx fields, football fields of people, all right?
Thereabouts.
That's a lot of people when you think about it. Look at the stadium, right? The number of people in
Undoubtedly.
FedEx field, I think it's 100,000, right? 99,000. So they all can't go work on a chicken farm. Where this is an enormous amount of people. So where are they? And what benefits are they getting that the taxpayers now are going to have to pick up, for them?
Many of these, I mean, many of these illegal aliens are usually go to major metropolitan areas such as like Los Angeles, New York City, the greater Houston area, Chicago, and many of them obtain employment as nannies, as construction workers, day laborers. And again, you have these individuals like people who couldn't care less about immigration laws and have no qualms with hiring these individuals. I mean, there's a common argument that, oh well, illegal aliens, they they try to make light of the fact that they violated our laws, they're working unlawfully by justifying the taxes that they pay, setting aside the fact that they don't mention how they obtain social security cards, the identities they claim to say who they say they are, which are often stolen more often than not. And then they try to boil it down to a price tag, saying, oh look, well they pay X amount in taxes. What they fail to realize is they're taking more than they're putting in. So whatever costs, if you want to put a price tag on this, that they put in is far outweighed by the strain they put on our social services, such as public safety and medical resources that these communities have.
Plus, I don't think it states the children. Now, if children are brought in, I think the children qualify for, SNAP, TANF, Medicaid,
Yeah,
but the parents don't, but the kids do.
they do. So they're US born children. Obviously, if you are here unlawfully, you are not eligible for any of those benefits. However, if you have a US born child, by definition, once your child is on SNAP or what have you, now the parent also takes benefits from that program because they are the parent of their child, so they're going to take part in whatever benefits that their child is
Child gets.
eligible because they are US born citizens thanks to birthright citizenship.
Right, right. Okay. That's what I thought. So it's, again, the financial burden. I don't even think we're going to feel this onslaught that we've had in the last 17 months. I don't know that we're even going to feel that for a couple of years yet, right?
Right. And no, and here's the thing, Kelly. This is only going to get worse if things don't change. I mean, when we keep looking at what the Biden administration is doing going forward with their anti-borders agenda, we see the fact that they don't care about border security. I mean, President Biden hired, in this one context, the perfect man for the job, Alejandro Mayorkas, and he has been the architect of dismantling our border security and our interior immigration enforcement. This man is doubling down on ensuring that, and if you're here without the authorization, you're not going anywhere. You're pretty much here to stay. I mean, this is someone who has said, okay, you know what? Even if you have prior criminal convictions or serious pending criminal charges, you have to go through this list to make sure that you're eligible for deportation. Imagine that. Imagine somebody who's been convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, has priors for similar things, and you cannot arrest this individual if they have family, they have somehow have ties to the community, or if they're within a certain distance within a building that's considered a non-arrestable location. Again, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg with the Biden administration. And now we're starting to find out that Title 42 is in jeopardy, which is the public health order that prevents COVID positive migrants from entering the country. I mean, for that's where that little piece of border security is on the chopping block.
Right. And that's May 24th, right? That they're talking about ending it.
I believe it's May 23rd or May 24th.
Okay.
23rd, yeah.
Anyway, I mean, that's very soon. And again, this is an important point too. One of the reasons that this country and every country has immigration laws, okay? One of those reasons is to make sure that people aren't bringing in communicable diseases, right?
Correct.
Like smallpox or whatever. I mean, there's a real need to check the people who are coming in, right? And the people who come in legally do that. Now, if you come in legally on a legal permanent resident visa, don't you have to have a doctor's,
Yeah, you do. You have to make sure you have to go through a health screen to make sure that you are not bringing any communicable diseases into the United States, and rightfully so. I mean, I find it hard to say here in the 21st century that it's controversial to require to see if foreign nationals need to be screened for public health concerns.
And we're not the only ones who do it. Every country does it.
Mexico does it.
Every country requests it.
When I was at the Center for Immigration Studies, I covered Spanish language media. And one of the things I noticed during the onset of the pandemic was Mexican immigration authorities were screening migrants for COVID-19, both legal and illegal. I don't understand how this is controversial when the United States does it, but when Mexico and Guatemala, who also took the initiative to screen migrants for COVID-19, when they do it, there's no uproar about it.
Right. No, absolutely. Any immigration, I mean, when I was a reporter with the Washington Times Inside Magazine for 7 years, and I went down to the southern border near Tucson.
Sure.
And I sat in the desert with some locals, and all day I watched people just walk across the border, large groups of people just walking across the border. And I wrote an article about it because it was amazing to me. There was nothing to stop. There wasn't even a fence. I mean, even a little wire fence, nothing. So, they're coming over. And I think the thing that kind of blew me away was, in order to get to our lookout spot where we were watching all the people come over the border, we had to walk from the highway into the desert. And you don't see it from the highway, but once you start walking through the desert, it's like a dump. I mean, literally, you have to walk over huge piles of people's clothing and plastic water bottles and junk, because when they get to a certain spot in the desert, this is what I was told, these groups that are empathetic to their plight meet them, give them new clothes, give them water and food, and everything they brought with them is sort of dumped in the desert. And it literally looked like a dump. Once you got in there, I was blown away by what it looked like. And I thought, where are the environmentalists? If they saw this, they should be screaming at what they're doing to the desert there, least of all the people coming in.
Unfortunately, this is one of the topics of immigration policy and border security that isn't really talked about all that much, and that's the environment. I mean, when we obviously, large groups of people coming in without authorization, it causes chaos at the border. Border agents are overwhelmed. There aren't enough agents to begin with, and now they're basically a catering processing committee at this point. Another thing is the fact that the areas where, as you mentioned, where illegal aliens are, whether they're dropped off by a human smuggler or they're picked up by sympathetic individuals, these areas look like landfills. I mean,
yes.
no one talks about the discarded waste that is left behind these individuals who are traveling. I mean, you see so many empty plastic water gallon bottles. You see
Yes.
clothes, you see all sorts of banana peels, all sorts of thrown away trash. And here's another thing, I didn't figure this out until recently here at Fair, but many individuals are discarding their old documentation on top of all this trash. In other words, they're going to border authorities without any documentation because that documentation says, hey, I am a citizen of Haiti or Chile or Brazil or whatever country I
Right.
recently naturalized a part of. So it was interesting because I met an individual who was at the border and made a collage of all these discarded identity cards. And he was telling me that many of these identity cards were on top of these pounds of trash everywhere. So it goes to show you that no attention is being brought to U.S. soil
No.
and Mexican soil that is being treated like a dumping ground.
Mm. I was amazed by it, but I was also amazed by when you go down to the border and you talk to the people that live there right on the border, the ranchers.
Sure.
I remember one of them telling me that there was a national park. It was like a mountain right near
Mhm.
Fort Hachucha, whatever. I can't even say it.
Okay.
Anyway, that the fire department refused to go in to fight fires in that national park, as our national park, because of the violence that was thrown at them by the drug smugglers.
No, that's a valid concern. I mean, on top of human smuggling that occurs in these national parks, there's a lot of illegal drug smuggling that occurs too. I mean, there have been instances of human smugglers or drug traffickers who are smoking cigarettes or they're smoking marijuana, and lo and behold, they don't put out whatever it is that they're smoking, and a fire catches on. Or on the other side of that coin, you see other lawless behavior of just these individuals who may or may not be armed, who are abusing these migrants or somebody else. It poses a problem for the for fire and EMS personnel to go into these areas who are trying to help individuals.
Right. Well, their own lives are at stake at that point.
Exactly.
And that's what I got from them, was that, it wasn't worth it for them to put their life on the line, to be shot at, whatever, by, the smugglers. And I thought, wow,
Hmm.
what a state of affairs. And I wrote this article in 2003.
Hmm.
So it's kind of funny. Immigration, from when I was very young in 1980, I started handling immigration cases, up through reporting on it, into my 40s. It didn't matter what Congress did. It didn't matter. It never, ever changed. Nothing changed. We just kept giving amnesty, turning our back. Oh, well, this will take care of it. We're going to give them amnesty because we can't kick them all out. And I wonder if that's where we're going again. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to ask that question yet, because I think that there's more to it. So let's talk a little bit about DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. These are the kids who were brought in by their illegal parents.
Hmm.
They weren't born here in the United States, but they were brought over the
Correct.
border. Now they're, in their 20s, whatever, and they have no status. So what do you think? What does FAIR think about that particular problem? And then I'll share with you what I think, but go ahead.
Of course. So a few years ago, former Virginia Representative Bob Goodlatte, he had introduced, I believe the bill is titled Securing America's Future Act. And one of the key tenets of that bill did address DACA recipients. And one of the provisions, what it would do is that it would not, and we here at FAIR supported this, not offering citizenship to DACA recipients. What instead it would do, it would offer the three-year period where these DACA recipients could renew their work permits and their status. It would not offer any form of citizenship or pathway to citizenship. And one of the other facets of the bill would be getting control of illegal immigration and legal immigration to a certain extent. So for instance, mandatory e-verify. putting an end to chain migration, which has not served the United States. I mean, can you imagine if, you come here to the United States, you bring your spouse or what have you, but then you decide to bring extended family like your brother-in-law or your son and your married son who's like 21 and has a wife. It would put an end to that. It would essentially shift it to where you could only bring the nuclear family, your spouse and your children. One of the other things would be it would start cranking down on sanctuary cities that engage in this type of lawless behavior. So in many respects, Representative Goodlatte's bill it contained a lot of the things that we have been asking for in terms of immigration reform, putting the American people's interests first before illegal immigrants.
I get that, but one of the things that and again, we can throw it back and forth, but I always thought that the preference system that we use was fair. I thought it was very fair because technically, Europe has gone through its preference system, which would be, unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, spouses and children of unmarried sons and daughters, spouses and children of permanent residents. So it goes through this preference system, right?
Sure.
So Europe has pretty much worked its way through their preference system. Okay, they really have. And now you see most of the numbers are coming from Asia and Central America, because now they're sort of at the top of their preference system, right? I mean,
Right.
I felt like it wasn't a perfect system, but it worked legally. These were the people who had could legally apply to come in. I think you're saying that Goodlatte wanted to get rid of that, and I'm not sure that that was necessary. Why would that be necessary?
Are you talking about the preference system?
Yeah.
So what Congressman Goodlatte was addressing was chain migration, essentially, where an individual who comes here legally and they are essentially
you're talking about illegal. That came here illegally.
No, I'm talking about legal immigration. So when you have a foreign national who came here lawfully, what that bill would do was it would take away the ability to extend, the ability to sponsor, to bring here legally extended family members that didn't include your children or your spouse. Because what we often see is that individuals they're sponsoring family members just purely based on bloodlines versus bringing in individuals on skills that the United States needs, or English speaking proficiency. So you can understand the issue of somebody coming here legally and they sponsor their second cousin, for example, whose skills, whose English speaking ability isn't taken into account when they're brought into the United States. So Congressman Goodlatte's bill would essentially change that to more merit-based immigration system.
That's interesting, because the family-sponsored preferences are, spouses of children of permanent residents. That's an F2A. I mean, why is that not appropriate? I always thought that these preferences and the way and the amount of visas that were given out to each of the preferences actually worked. So it sounds like he's kind of destroying the preference system on families, okay? Because it starts with the first preference is unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, right? And that's the largest category that we give out visas to. And then the second preference is spouses and children and unmarried sons and daughters of permanent residents, right? So you're saying that he wants to get rid of that.
What the bill would do is it would still allow for the unmarried sons and daughters of legal immigrants to come here, including their spouse. And let's say you were to bring, what it would do is it would basically disallow legal immigrants from sponsoring extended family members and shift it more toward.
I'm sorry, but it doesn't do that now. I mean, that's not a preference. So how is there any sponsoring going on of the brother-in-law? I don't understand. There's not a preference for that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one? I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. There's no sponsoring of the brother-in-law?
Right. So so again, we go to the third preference, which is married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth is brothers and sisters of adult U.S. citizens. Right? So I don't see a preference where the spouse and children of permanent residents can even apply for any further down the family tree. I don't see that preference.
So, right. So legal immigrants can still, they, as right now, as the law is written, they can still sponsor extended family members,
But
even
under
though
what preference? I mean, they have to fall into one of these categories because that's how the State Department tracks them. I mean, that's how they track the number of visas that are being given out.
Mhm.
So are
So
they, I mean, I don't know how they would track those visas. Is that special immigrants? Could it be special immigrants? But again, it's not a large portion. You know, that's not a large portion of the amount of visas that are being given out. Is this chain, you know, family thing that
are you not familiar with chain migration,
no,
or?
I am. I'm of course I'm familiar with it, but I'm trying to figure out under what preference they're applying for legally applying for a visa. If I'm a permanent resident and I'm
Mhm.
applying for my, you know, my brother-in-law, there's not a preference for that. So under where are they getting the visas for that?
So I'm not entirely familiar with that specific provision,
Uh-huh.
but yes, as it currently stands, yes, you can still sponsor extended family
Hmm,
members.
interesting. Okay. Well, and again, I'm just trying to understand the law. But again, I don't think that category, in my mind, that was never the problem. It was never the problem. It was the illegal. See, so when you have 10 million illegal aliens who we gave amnesty to, right, in
Mhm.
86. So these people now are permanent residents. Now they can do what? Apply for visas for their family, right?
Right.
A million people, 10 million people, that's a lot of visas. So what does that do to the people who applied legally? They're not going to get a visa for a long time. Exactly.
No, it definitely adds strain to the process. I mean, more than it already is. I mean, again, you're talking about you're basically talking about codifying legal status for a group of individuals who either came here unlawfully or overstayed their visa, in which case they became an illegal alien. And now we're shoving these individuals who did it the right way, who are or trying to do it the right way. We're also, we can just prioritize these individuals who came here unlawfully or violated some sort of law to be here.
Right. Well, we congratulated them for their illegal behavior.
Yeah,
Congratulations, you
that's
broke our laws. Welcome, you know, to the United States. So what it did is it hurt those people who legally applied. And again, I'll use the Philippines as an example. Um, in fact, right now, if you look at the unskilled in the Philippines, I can't believe I'm even looking at this after all these years. They're looking at people giving out a visa to people who applied in 2002, right? They were stupid. They should have found a way to get to the border so they could just cross over and they're in. Do you understand? We're like sending the wrong message to the world. We're saying, you know, if you do it legally, it's going to take you your whole life before you'll be called for your visa,
Mhm.
especially if the Republicans get in November. Let's play La La Land for a minute. If the Republicans take back the House and, you know, get a majority in the Senate, Biden's a lame duck. Do you think
Mhm.
they'll pass some sort of amnesty bill for all the millions that have illegally entered since, you know, the Biden administration?
I certainly hope not. I mean, there'd be no reason to essentially, again, as you said, reward an entire segment of individuals who broke our laws. I don't, in what other area of law do we reward lawless behavior like that? You know, if you commit burglary, thefts, armed robbery, do we just say, okay, listen, all you individuals who just committed these crimes, we're just gonna ignore what you did and we're gonna we're just going to forego any sort of penalty or punishment because of that, and you'll have a clean record as a result of it. I don't understand why that framework is any different with immigration. No, we have these are individuals who've broken the law, who knew they broke the law, and we're rewarding them with citizenship.
But on the same token, let's look at the DACA kids. Okay,
Hmm.
they didn't have any say when their parents brought them over the border illegally. Um, we don't punish bank robbers' children when somebody robs a bank. They go to jail, but the kids don't, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, in that case, I actually feel like we could actually tweak that law because that wasn't their fault. They weren't the perpetrators of that crime. They were sort of the victims of that crime, if you want to look at it that way. You know what I mean? And there's only what I think that I read there was 800,000 DACA kids.
Thereabouts, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, we're not talking about an enormous amount of people, and these are people who are here already working and living, right?
Right.
I don't know. I think Congress might want to rethink how we treat these people, given the fact that I think they were the victims of the illegal behavior. Um, but again, it doesn't make sense to me why Congress refuses to take action. I mean, they can't go now that we have 1 million people, let's say that entered this year. Okay. So,
Hmm.
and the Republicans take over in November. What are they going to do? They're going to hire 1 million ICE, people to go out and round them all up. Well, that's silly. How's that going to happen?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Meaning, there's no way to round up these people, even if we wanted to, and send them back, right? There really isn't. Financially, it would be an enormous expense to do that. Manpower wise, we don't even have that kind of numbers in ICE or on Border Patrol to do it. So
Hmm.
they're going to stay. Is that right? I mean, I don't know what other options we have. It's just not
Well,
financially feasible.
and this goes back to the start of the show, where again, had we been enforcing the immigration laws on the books, making sure that this wasn't just window dressing, saying like, hey, we're going to give everybody amnesty now and we'll get to enforcement later. Had we actually been doing mandatory e-verify, being rigorous with worksite enforcement, ensuring that sanctuary cities were cooperating with ICE authorities, this wouldn't have happened. And the Biden administration has essentially gone with the wrecking ball and saying like, okay, let me double down on everything that's already problematic with what's going on in the immigration policy realm. So it's one of those things. It's like how we got here to this point of, wow, there's millions of illegal aliens in the United States.
Right. So I don't understand. I mean, I guess I'm looking for an answer. If we have the opportunity, how can we possibly get them to go back to their home country? It just seems like they're just here. Once they're here, they're here. And our lawmakers don't have the spine or the gumption or the whatever it takes to actually put out some very, very strict laws saying, if we find you working or living in the United States, we're going to deport you.
Hmm.
Right? They don't have it.
Right. So again, I think it comes down to, had we been enforcing the laws on the books, we wouldn't be in the situation where we are now. I think there has been this growing, I guess, this right-left merger of trying to diminish border security and our interior immigration enforcement apparatuses, to where we're getting to this point where there's so many illegal aliens. Now the conversation happens like, what do we do with these individuals that are here? And listen, we still have laws on the books. We should still be enforcing them. Listen, if you are here without authorization, whether you came here, you crossed the border illegally, or you overstayed your visa, you should be deported. Put simply, I don't see I don't see the issue of deporting, or of administering the consequences of somebody who violated our immigration laws.
No, I don't have an issue with it either. I mean, I that's is my argument from the beginning. just enforce the laws that we already have on the books. I don't think we need to rewrite the immigration laws. I think
Hmm.
the ones that are there are pretty good, and if you enforce them, they're great. And I think it's a real deterrent for illegal aliens to cross our border to try and work here, because if they get caught and they get sent back, I mean, they're going to tell everybody, oh no, you can't work there because, they'll send you back. It's
No, absolutely. I mean, you have that deterrent effect. I mean, another thing that another two pieces of policy that were essentially that were helping us hold the line in terms of preventing U.S. bound migration is the Remain in Mexico policy and the asylum cooperative agreements that we had with the Northern Triangle countries. Essentially, if you are a third country national and you are applying for asylum, you must apply for it in the most immediate neighboring country that you are in proximity to. You cannot asylum shop all the way up to the United States
right.
and just say, hey, I'm here applying for asylum, when the majority of asylum cases are economic related. They're fraudulent. They don't their claims do not meet the the statutory confines of receiving asylum.
Exactly. And okay, this is a great into what Merrick Garland put out yesterday, the Attorney General, who made a decision on a case and basically said he overturned a judge's decision, a counsel's decision,
Mm,
and he says, quote, in the future, immigration judges may consider a respondent's mental health when determining whether a respondent, after being convicted in a final sentence of a particularly serious crime, poses a danger to the United States community, unquote.
mm,
So, in other words, if you're applying for asylum, now the case that they were talking about, this gentleman, it was a burglary in New
right.
Jersey. He got 4 years in prison, but
He did.
he's claiming asylum. He wants asylum in the United States now, right? And his
Hmm.
argument was that if he doesn't get asylum, that they return him to his country, that his life will be in danger because of his sexual uh, uh, well, because of his sexual status and his mental illness. And I'm like, well, mental illness isn't even on the asylum list of things that you can apply for asylum, right?
Right.
So now we're going to consider mental illness for all of these people for asylum.
Yes. No. This latest move by the Attorney General, it's essentially adding more burden to the already stressed out asylum to our asylum system. Because now what the AG has essentially done is said, okay, look, we're going to add another avenue for illegal aliens or asylum would be
Right.
asylum recipients to stay in the country even longer. Because now we have to look at individuals. Because again, if you look at the INA, it shows that if you're convicted of a felony or other serious crime, you you were not allowed to stay here and would resume with the process. Now, what he's essentially done is says, nope. If an immigration judge determines that mental health is a factor in this, now they're here in the country a lot longer. So he's adding fuel to the fire
Right.
with this policy directive.
And it's a wide open door. Mental health, when you start talking about mental health, I mean, the DSM has what, 465 different mental illnesses listed. So
Hmm.
just pick one. Just pick one, and that's what. Okay, it doesn't matter that I've committed a heinous crime, I'm mentally ill, and you can't send me back. It's going to be very, very easy to allow the asylum cases now. I think that's my fear.
No, I mean it's now more vulnerable than
Yeah.
it already was. We're again we're giving people would be bogus asylum filers more ammunition to game the system.
Yeah, and again, you know, getting back to what we started with is just enforce the laws that we have on the books now. Even if we just did that, if we don't change anything, if we don't tweak anything, it would help. Okay, because we have
Hmm.
IRCA made it clear. You find the employer, you go after them, but we're not
Hmm.
doing that. And if we did, we don't have to change the law. It's there. It's been there for a long time. There's just no will on the part of lawmakers to enforce these laws. That's, what I see. And again, I think both of us would agree that I'm all for legal immigration. I think the more people that want to immigrate here, I think that's great. Legal immigration is wonderful. That's what the United States is based on. Okay. But you got to do it legally because it's unfair to those who do it legally. Okay, it's unfair to them if we allow these people who come in illegally to get ahead to the head of the line. That was always my argument.
When we look at, again, to your point earlier about how, again, illegal aliens have essentially sidestepped the legal immigration process, and that pretty much casts aside those individuals who want to come here lawfully. I don't think that's okay. And, as you stated, I don't think you do either. I think most people would agree that's not fair. Why should we prioritize and cater to individuals who have broken our laws? I mean, they're beginning their new relationship with their supposedly new country on the wrong foot. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
that's
as a criminal, basically, you committed a crime by entering the country illegally.
right.
And I don't see why everybody doesn't get this. But I also don't understand why people don't talk. If you look at the news and the commentators talking about, oh, immigration reform, we got to reform our immigration laws. I don't think so. I mean, I really don't. I think that's an easy way of saying let's keep status quo.
Well, it's more of the same. I mean, with IRCA, at least there was the, at least on the table, or promise, if you even want to call it that, of immigration enforcement and making sure that we're going after employers. Now, I mean, what's going on Capitol Hill, these amnesties that are being introduced, we don't even get the word of the verbal affirmation of like, oh yes, we're gonna tweak, we're gonna make sure that this amnesty doesn't happen again, and we're gonna make sure that our immigration authorities have all the tools they need to prevent future waves of illegal immigration. There's not even that. It's just like most illegal aliens would qualify for these proposed amnesties.
Right, right. So what is FAIR looking for? What does FAIR want to see happen with the immigration laws as far as the illegals? I mean, are you all in favor of the wall?
Yes, we do support a border wall. We do support it in strategic areas where it's needed. Obviously, putting it over over a body of water, not so practical. But yes, we do support a border wall. I mean, it's proven to work combined with technology and the appropriate amount of Border Patrol agents and CBP officials. It's an effective means of border security, but it's just one aspect to border security.
Mm-hmm. What else are you looking for?
In terms of border security, we're hoping that the Remain in Mexico, also known as MPP, and the ACA agreements are back on the table. These agreements were instrumental in stopping illegal immigration at our southern border. It gave border authorities a chance to breathe, so to speak, letting them focus on individuals who are coming in here who don't want to be caught. Because what these deals, as I mentioned earlier, what these arrangements did, they prevented people just gaming the system, just hoping to qualify for asylum and being released into the United States. So we're hoping that whether it's the Biden administration or this Congress, that they put these deals back in place. I can't tell you how important these arrangements were during the Trump administration. Another thing that we fully support and that hope remains in place is Title 42. Again, it makes no sense bringing in individuals who are COVID positive into the country. I think if that tool were to be removed, we could see larger numbers of illegal aliens appearing at the southern border.
Is that even possible? I mean, it just seems like it's just a flood every day. And again, I mean, I would be content if they just enforced the laws that we had. I would be content with that. I would think, that's at least a step in the right direction, but they're not. Instead, it looks like we favor those who can break the law, and we punish those who do it legally. Especially in the preferences that are the unskilled. We punish these people in countries who apply for a legal visa, who are unskilled, and they wait 20, 25 years before they get a call for their visa, and they're just stuck. It's very unfair to them. And I've always thought that when I was handling the cases, I just thought, oh, this is so unfair. And when they passed IRCA and they say they're going to go after the employers, but they don't. Even the immigration law itself, there's sort of a catch-22, because it says you can't be in the country illegally and work illegally. However, if you are working illegally, you can have your employer file with the Department of Labor for a labor certification, right? So there's that catch-22. But again, they're supposed to go home. They're supposed to go home to their country and wait for their visa. But we don't have any enforcement to make them go home and wait. Okay, it's okay.
Exactly.
You can get a labor certification. You can get an I-140. Okay, you can file all that, but you're supposed to go home and wait. So these people don't. They're lucky they got to just walk over the border or came in on a visitor's visa or whatever, and they stayed. And I feel like we're doing a disservice to those who want to legally immigrate here, by congratulating those who broke our laws.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that going forward, regardless of who controls Congress or who the president is in 2024 and thereafter, I think we seriously need to take a long look of how we're going forward with our current immigration policy. We need to ask ourselves, is this benefiting American citizens? Because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is the needs and interests of American citizens. Like how are underserved communities who are already going through a number of issues such as poverty, substance addiction, how are they doing with this influx of illegal aliens now in their communities? No one really asks these questions, you know.
Right.
Many of these individuals and communities are overlooked, you know. It's concerning to see that this administration, who has championed themselves as an advocate for the American worker or underserved Americans across the country, they're undermining that message by allowing large numbers of illegal aliens to enter the country, obtain employment without any consequences, allowing criminals to roam our streets with very little chance of being deported. I mean, how is that compassionate? How is that fair to the American people and to legal immigrants who came here and did the process the right way?
Right, exactly. And I there's a bigger issue too. It's American sovereignty. We're not a sovereign nation if we don't have a border. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's the definition of sovereignty, right? Also, our national security is at risk. We don't know who's coming over the border. We don't know what they're bringing with them. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So we can all assume these maybe they're just, people who have had a hard time in their country and they're looking for the American dream. It's not that simple, not in today's world, right?
No, and on the border security question, I mean, sure, we're apprehending these individuals, and rightfully so, but we also take into consideration the gotaways, which are individuals who were able to successfully evade detection or capture by immigration and border authorities. I mean, who are we not catching? I mean,
Right.
oftentimes what you see are these cartels and these human smugglers. They allow a large group of illegal immigrants to cross the border in large numbers in order to distract border authorities, in order for other groups of aliens to enter, or for criminals, or to smuggle forms of contraband into the country. We also have to be concerned about that. We also have to be concerned that our authorities able to catch bad actors, such as people who are on the terror watch list, who are affiliated in transnational gangs. These are questions that I'm not seeing being answered through this administration.
Right, right. And I don't think anybody's in a hurry to do that, but I think there is an awful lot of press being paid to the fentanyl situation with the number of people dying from fentanyl now in the United States. But I don't know. Again, I'm going to wrap this up and just say that I think that just sticking to the laws that we have on the books, if they don't do anything else, that would be a step in the right direction, because they are good. We have a means to stop the illegal entry, or at least if you do enter illegally, to send you out again. If you apply for visa, a working visa.
Mhm.
So, you know, I appreciate what you guys do. I always have. I've known you since the 80s, and thank you for all you do. And thank you for coming on my show today. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me on, Kelly. No, I mean, again, fair. We're always going to be here on the behalf of the American people, making sure that they have a voice in this immigration debate.
I appreciate it. All right, let's see where it goes.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye-bye.